So, welcome to Mindful Trinity. I'm your host, Vaishnavi Charan. So, this afternoon we are joined by a very special guest. We've been discussing for a while right now when she's going to be available for us to go on and the topics that society needs at the moment. So, a little bit about her. She's a counseling psychologist with over 10 years of experience in individual and couples therapy. She's a huge advocate of mental health and mindfulness, as well as self care. So, we're going to be discussing on mental health and social media. I'm sure all of y'all are experiencing what everyone is experiencing right now. This coronavirus pandemic has caused several disruptions in personal disruptions as well as in collective lives worldwide. The uncertainties surrounding the pandemic have also led to multifaceted mental health concerns such as stress, depression, anxiety. So we are joined by Rakhi Beekrum this afternoon. She's going to be sharing her insights and her knowledge and expertise with the subject and how to help us, trying to just de-stress and live much more healthier lives. Welcome, Rakhi. We are so grateful that you gave us this opportunity to engage with you and for us to learn more from you. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. And I know you are very busy.
Thank you so much, Vaishnavi, for inviting me, for creating this platform, and for spreading awareness and creating this place, a safe space for the community as well, which I think is so much needed. So I'm glad to be here, and I hope I'm able to share some valuable information and some tips that others will be able to use to improve their lives in some way.
I'm sure you will. So, to our audience, let me just explain our program for you. So, after the discussion between Rocky and I will go back onto Facebook to check if you have any questions for her. So, if you have any questions, I suggest you actually go onto our comments feed, type it there for her, and basically afterwards she'll be able to go on. I mean, I will go on and I'll read it out to her. So I just want to read out a little. I actually put something together for Mindful Trinity just to make sure basically it's a disclaimer, let you know that all of the information that you're going to be getting today is from our guest speakers, which today is actually Rakhi, and uh, Mindful Trinity is just the medium that's going to be sharing all of these insights with you. If you want to know more about the disclaimers, you can actually go onto our Facebook page or onto our website and actually read more about it. So to start off our discussion, Rocky, what is your definition of mental health?
I think mental health is a lot more than just the absence of mental illness. So, mental health really encompasses our ability to deal with life stresses, to cope with life's challenges, and a general feeling of wellness of the mind and the body. I don't like the idea of separating the idea of physical and mental health. For me, there's no health without mental health. So, for me, health in itself is comprised of both mental and physical health, and I can't understand how we would have one without the other. So for me, it's a general feeling of wellness that includes the body and mind.
Okay, thank you so much. I actually forgot to click on my record. I'm just going to do that right now. Okay, thank you so much for that. So, what would you say with regards to the internet at our fingertips? What would you say about the effects on the internet on our mental health for that?
Well, I think we've been seeing it for a long time. So there's a lot of evidence, a lot of research that shows that um, how we use social media can have an impact on our mental health. It can lead to depression, can lead to anxiety, can lead to low self-esteem. And it can lead to further feelings of loneliness. So, while we might use social media to feel connected, actually it can lead us to feeling a lot lonelier, which we might not have expected. And that's because we might have large social networks, but truly we actually feel those that we're still alone, that we don't have any genuine support, because sometimes the conversations, the relationships we have on social media are quite superficial. It's not, you can have, and we know many people who've committed suicide. They might have had thousands and thousands of friends and followers, but they hadn't reached out to a single person. So it can really lead to feelings of loneliness. But what I want to say is that social media is not bad. I mean, it's a platform that I love. It enables me to do a lot of good work. It enables me to reach out to people who I otherwise never would have been able to reach out to. I don't personally believe that the internet or social media is even addictive. I think personalities are addictive. So I think the problem doesn't lie in social media, it lies in our usage of it and mindless usage of social media or the internet. Because when we're mindful of how we're consuming information, and we don't just consume information on social media, we consume information, meaning what we read, what videos we watch, but we also create information. So we create posts, we share things on social media. So both also, both give an idea of our own mental health and impact mental health the other way. So the key is always to be mindful about what you're doing, about what you're reading, about what you're posting.
Yeah, I actually do agree. It's like we are also in control of our own lives, what we are able to read, because not everything is actually good for our mental health when we go onto social media or even the internet for that matter. So yeah, thank you for that information. Also, with so many of us using social media, especially during the COVID pandemic, how do we protect ourselves from COVID anxiety?
So I think the first thing I want to say is that we must be so grateful that we've had technology, access to technology during the pandemic, because I can't imagine how much harder our lives would have been without technology. It's allowed us to keep updated with the news. It's allowed us to reach out to loved ones who we couldn't physically be with. So it's created a lot of positive during this time. Yes, people are a lot more anxious when they're online more often, when they're reading too much, when they're hyper focused on the news or hyper focused on statistics and deaths and losses and messages of funerals and condolences online. When we speak about COVID anxiety, I think the first thing I want to say, and actually my post today on Facebook and Instagram says that not all anxiety is pathological, because at sometimes anxiety is a very natural response to an unnatural situation. And a pandemic for us is an unnatural situation. So if you're generally not an anxious person or you've never really been anxious, but you're anxious right now, it's not necessarily problematic. It would be strange if you were not anxious about certain things. It's the degree of anxiety and how it's impacting on your life. So let's talk about that, for example. So, when, do you have a right to be afraid right now? Of course we do, because there's a lot of uncertainty. I think every single one of us has experienced losses during this time. So, we're anxious about our own health and safety. We're anxious for our loved ones. We're anxious about our jobs. Many people have lost jobs. We're anxious about our security in this world. So there's a lot of anxiety that is irrational during this time. But sometimes anxiety can be pathological, it can be clinical. That is when the way we react to anxiety, when our anxiety reaction is disproportionate to what the stressor is. So, for example, someone who's staying at home and following all the protocols and not really seeing any visitors, who's paranoid about contracting the virus, we would say that is disproportional. But for example, if you're working on the front line, if you're at high risk and you're anxious, then we would say that is completely understandable. But what is important is to not avoid anxiety, it's to identify when it does arise. So basically, the root of anxiety is a thought. We often don't recognize it, but we feel anxious, and that feeling is triggered by just a thought. So the thought gives rise to feeling, which gives rise to behavior. So to explain that better, it might be the thought of, I don't feel safe. And we might feel anxious because we're thinking, I'm not safe. And the behavior might be avoidance, it might be panic, it might be sleeplessness, it might be panic attacks. So once you identify the thought, you've got to ask yourself, is this thought rational? Like, do I have evidence to believe that this thing is a real threat, that it actually might happen to me? If there's no reason to believe it, then we know that that anxiety is a clinical anxiety and possibly needs more attention. But if you realize, well, actually it's a threat, if you think, what, could I lose my job? What are the chances? Well, yeah, the chances are that I could lose my job because many people have, because the economy of our country and most countries is struggling during this time. But the
Mhm.
focus always needs to come back to us. So when we're anxious, we're often hyper focused on things that are not in our control. So we can't single handedly control the pandemic, we can't control the outcome of it. But what can we control? We can control our thoughts, our actions, what we choose to focus on. So if you're anxious, I'll use the example about contracting the virus, is to ask yourself, is it a realistic anxiety? Yes, it's realistic, because if we look at the statistics, it means we might get it. But to come back to what you can control is asking yourself, what is in my control to prevent this from happening? And there are many things. So, one of the things that we're fortunate about is that the preventative measures are things that we're able to implement by ourselves, which we don't need anything further for. So, we can social distance, we can wear masks, we can sanitize. So, these are things that are completely in our control. So, the more you bring it back to any situation, always ask yourself, what about the situation is in my control? And when you focus on that, you'll start to feel less anxious.
I actually do like that. What is in your control? Because we can actually ask ourselves these questions and find out what are we in control and what are we not in control. So how do we set boundaries? I think a lot of us are actually asking that because a lot of people are in our space, especially when we live in a home with a lot of people in one house. And also, a lot of our friends and families don't understand this pandemic is actually a bit crazy out there right now. Um, but some of them take offense when you don't allow them to visit you. How do you set boundaries?
So the first thing to recognize is what is a boundary. So I like to think of it in a very simple way. So if you had to think firstly of a physical boundary, so think about the home you live in. There's some boundary around your home, whether it's a fence or gate. What is the purpose of that? The purpose of that is to prevent anything that is harmful from coming in, right? So intruders can't enter your property and harm you. So emotional boundaries, in the same way, are there to protect us. So it comes back to us. So we can't set up boundaries if we don't know what is important to us. So emotional boundaries are mannerisms or mechanisms we put into place to prevent ourselves from being harmed in any way. So if your safety is important, if you're worried about contracting the virus, what boundaries do you need to set up? So ask yourself what is important for you. Once you understand it, and then you ask clearly and directly for what you want. It's also understanding that we are responsible for protecting, implementing, and maintaining the boundaries, and nobody else is. So it is frustrating when we set a boundary and other people disrespect it. But it's easy to lose control and focus on the other, and we then feel helpless. But it's important to bring back the focus again to what can we control. So if my boundaries are that I don't want anyone other than who lives under my roof in my home, I will decide that that is the way that it is going to be, that nobody is allowed. Um, and people will say things. So someone will say that, I just think that it's really, really rude of you. I think you're being really insensitive, or I think you're being paranoid about it.
Mhm.
So our job is not really to get entangled in an argument, because it's not going to help us. But it
Mhm.
might mean having a difficult conversation, which might mean, what, it might look like I'm silly or being paranoid to you. However, this is really important to me, and therefore I'm not changing these rules for my home. But then, because we might have different personalities within our household, and while one of you might feel strongly that I don't want any guests, so I'm not going to be socializing, but say you have a family member who lives at home who is socializing. So you could, first start by expressing your fear about it. Often when we're upset or when we're scared, we start to fight with the other person and we don't get what we want. But when we can be calm about it and communicate to them directly by explaining what we're worried about. So my fear is that you might contract the virus. And to say, what, I trust that you are being responsible. However, I don't always trust that the people you're around are taking the same precautions that you are. So this is what would make me feel safer. It would make me feel safer if you stopped some of these social engagements, or if you could rather, have an online or phone call chat with your friends instead of going to see them. And say they still refuse, what you have to do is to say, well, if we're going to be in this space, then I am going to maintain my distance from you in the home.
Mm.
And I need you to respect our shared spaces in this way. So can you wash your own dishes and wash your own clothes, whatever it means. However, I know that I say it very, very calmly, and I know that when you're in a face it isn't always possible because we feel
Mm.
emotional. It triggers so many emotions in us when someone puts us in this position because we're
True.
already anxious, we're already worried, there's already so much of loss. So,
Mm.
face to face with that, having to deal with someone who you think is putting you or putting themselves at risk might scare you further. And therefore, you may not say it as calmly. But speaking calmly really is a superpower. So if you feel really upset, take a step back, take a time out, slow, deep breathing, as you know very well, Vaishnavi. That
Mm.
always helps to relax you. And when
Yep.
we're screaming, when we're shouting, when we're using unfavorable language, nobody's paying attention to what you were saying. They're listening to the tone, they hear
Mm.
noise. So to get
Yeah.
your message across, it's important to speak calmly. You can still speak with authority, but speak calmly and speak respectfully. Repetition is important. So you might say something and it might fall in deaf ears. And again, to say, like I mentioned before, this is how I feel. So a good way to always speak, especially in a conflictual situation, is I. So not you are inconsiderate or you always do this or you never do that because the other person gets defensive, but rather to
Mm.
focus on, do you know what, I feel really worried about our safety when
Yeah.
you go out so frequently. What I would like is this: I would like you to reconsider your socializing, or I would like, if you insist on going out, that you and I maintain a social distance because that is the best way I can protect myself.
Wow. Very nice. Very informative. Really. Very helpful. So that actually has come to the end of our discussion. I'm going to go online onto Facebook to check the responses from our audience, and then I'll be actually able to read that to you. We have one. I actually have an anonymous person. She actually sent this earlier. My question is: we lost my brother 6 months ago. Mom was doing okay, getting through it day at a time. And suddenly, a week ago, she has anxiety, fear of being alone. And the COVID second wave is not helping at all. She is now with me and seems calm with my family around. I don't want to put her onto medication and would like to know what could be the real cause of what's going on with her. There are days she just gets fear and anxious. My brother was a constant worry for her as he was not in a good place in his life. He actually committed suicide. She's worried about him all the time, even now that he's gone. When he was alive, he actually told her all of his problems. And she's still worrying about him so much. What could I do to help her cope? She is 75 years old, and I prefer no medication as she has many other medical issues. Thanks.
So sorry for your loss. And loss is difficult, but losing a loved one to suicide just brings so many more complications. So grief is also something that's different for every single person. There's no defined way in which we grieve that. There's no timeline or there's no way in which we grieve. And often it happens in waves. Certain things might happen. We might feel that we're actually coping okay, and then we might just go through a really, really bad patch. So, what I mean, while we don't, and we're not allowed to diagnose anyone online, it sounds like she would benefit from at least having a conversation if you have a GP that you trust, and to speak to a professional, because it sounds like it might be a grief response, but it's only
Mhm.
when she speaks to someone, they can do a thorough assessment, that they understand what the problem is, and then they can help her accordingly. I
Mhm.
think we feel so helpless seeing our parents go through difficulty and not being able to do anything for them.
True.
A
Yeah.
major thing with grief is recognizing that we can't take someone else's pain away. And it's hard because we want to fix, we want to rescue the other person. But
Mhm.
the most powerful thing we can do is genuinely be there for the other person. Not to say don't cry or don't worry, but sit with them and be present with them in their worrying, in their crying. Not to exacerbate the problem, but to provide a safe space for them, to allow
Yeah.
them to speak, to show them that it is okay. However they are feeling is valid at the time. And when you don't know what to do, the best thing you could do is ask them to say, what could I do to help you best right now?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's actually amazing, amazing the way you actually put it in into words. Because at the moment, I'm sure you're actually getting a lot of people calling you for the same reason. Grief is none of us actually experienced something like this before, like we were actually discussing before. So I have another question. The siblings is not in our control. What do we do with them? Do we just distance ourselves from them?
So it sounds like one of the boundary issues, for example, right? I think what you said is setting the boundary about what the rules and expectations are. It would depend on many factors. What sort of role does this person play in the home? Are they contributing in the home? So you could decide, the rest of you that you feel are being more responsible about the pandemic and more responsible about safety, to have a discussion and decide together. If we feel that this person is putting us at risk, and if we've had a conversation and they refuse to reason with us, what else can we do? What else? Or can we say that they're not allowed to live in the home? And I mean, I don't want to ever just suggest something harsh. So I'm just thinking out
Mm,
loud. So these are conversations that you need to have. So what boundaries can you set into place for that person? Whether it's they're going to stay confined into the room, or what they can and can't do in the home. So that is something that you sit down with the others who live in the home and
mm,
decide what that is going to be. We can't change others, unfortunately, and but
mm.
therefore, but what we allow also will continue. So if we just allow it, it will also happen. So we need to think about what boundaries do we need to put in place that is going to make us feel safe and that are reasonable for your context. It just depends on what that situation is in your life at the moment.
Yeah, I actually do agree. So we have another question. This is from Lorraine. She asks, okay, after stating your boundaries many times, but it's disregarded by someone who is very controlling, is it okay to cut them off? Difficult conversations have been had, and the person has acknowledged what you've stated, yet there's always a but.
So, there's no but in an apology, right? So often
Mm,
when there's a but, it means that they're justifying behavior. So it's not a true acknowledgement. So depending again on your personal circumstances, again, if we state a boundary and we do not enforce the boundary, it means that that is not even a boundary. That's just a suggestion. You're just suggesting to someone to do something or not do something. Because a boundary is something that you're firm about, that this is what I want. And what it
mm,
needs to be followed with is a consequence. And you could decide what the consequence is. And in your case, Lorraine, if you're thinking, well, a consequence is, what, I actually maybe don't want to continue having a relationship with this person because I feel they're disrespectful to me. That is part of you setting a consequence to say, this thing is really important to me. We've spoken about it many times. I would like to continue a relationship for me. And in order for us to have a better relationship, this is what I need from you. However, if you aren't able to do it, it actually means that we cannot have this sort of relationship. And again, I know I say it very calmly and nicely, and it's hard when you're in the situation, but as calmly as you could possibly say, because when we start to feel helpless, it shows when we're speaking, and we feel more vulnerable to the other person, especially if you describe them as someone more controlling over you. So repeat your boundary, ensure that they understand it. Them saying I understand is not them understanding it, because behavior is more important than what the other person says. And you've got to consider again what is appropriate for you where you are in your life.
mm, mm. Yes, that's absolutely very well said. I also have someone else from another question from Malini. She says, I suffer with anxiety and depression, and sometimes really get frustrated with my energetic 2 year old. I often question whether it is normal or if it's my anxiety and if I am a bad parent. I have a very supportive husband. Also, I am worried that my child will pick up on this. Do you have any advice for the stressed mommy?
So the first thing I want to say is that you are not alone. I think if you sit have a deep conversation with any mom of a 2-year-old or a toddler, you will know that they're all stressed. So I think the first thing is that this is a stressful time. And as you mentioned, there is depression and anxiety. So I would ask you to go back to basics and continue with whatever help you, or whatever treatment you are hopefully getting, whether it's medication, but sometimes medications doesn't really solve the issue. It's important to get to the root of the issue. And if you're seeing a therapist, if you're seeing a psychologist, to get the help, and that's where you develop the coping skills for what the stresses are. We've also got to stop and identify, what do we need? What would help me feel better right now? I know it's difficult when you have a 2-year-old to find quiet time, but if you can have the quiet time, like you said, your spouse is very supportive. So when you have the quiet time, to ask yourself, what would really help me in the situation right now? Do you need another resource? Do you need help from a different family member? Do you need paid help during this time? Do you need your partner to step up and help in a different way? Are you being sleep deprived? Do you need to get your health checked? So stop and ask, what is it that I need? And then reach out and get the help that you need. So, no, it is not abnormal. And no, you were definitely not a bad mother. Every mother goes through that phase. And naturally, when we're anxious, when we're upset, when we're scared, we take it out on those who are closest to us because they are there. So when you say you're worried that your child is going to adopt this behavior, so then I'm going to say the children do what you do, not what you say. So therefore, you getting the help that you need is important. Often as mothers, we put everyone first. The whole world comes before you because we think that it's selfish. But because you recognize that your child could pick this up, you taking care of yourself and getting the help that you need for you means that you're going to be able to be a calmer parent, to set a better example for your child.
Thank you so much. So basically, the viewer that asked a question about the jealous siblings, she has a second part to it. She basically says that the sibling does not live with her, but is constantly jealous in general and loves creating smear campaigns. Do you have anything to add to that?
So, I mean, it's horrible when you're the victim of such things. So, I think focus on what you can control. So, although it's hard, it's really, really hurtful when it's a sibling that's saying things about you that are hurtful or not true. What you pay attention to is what will grow in your life. So you could choose whether you want to pay attention to it or you don't want to pay attention to it. I've said this several times before, and it's one of the most valuable pieces of advice ever, is that because we can't control what other people say of us, we've got to live our lives and carry ourselves in such a way that nobody would even believe what other people say about us. So the most important thing is coming back to what you can control, which is how you carry yourself. So when you notice it, it will irritate you, but do not give it more than 5 minutes. Be irritated about it for 5 minutes and come back to what is important for me in my life. So if that sibling is doing what they're doing, it means that you were giving them more importance than they deserve. Whose opinions in your life really matter? I always say the people whose opinions matter, those people who have your back, the people that you would generally go to for advice, the people that pay your bills. So unless a sibling's doing any of that, then what they say about you doesn't matter. But the most powerful thing you can do, you don't have to undo any of their mess, because some people who want to might believe what they say and you can't control it, but a reasonable person actually might not. And someone who's happy and content in their own life is going to pay no attention to smear campaigns. But I would say is focus your energy on just being who you are, and that will speak for itself.
Wow, thank you so much. I guess I'm sure all of our viewers as well, including me, we have gained so much of knowledge from you with this. I'm getting a lot of comments saying that they thoroughly needed this and they actually enjoyed everything that everything that you actually shared with us. So that's a good thing. So we're actually making some sort of headways with people actually trying to calm themselves down and trying to take all of this knowledge into their homes, into their lives, and trying to live better lifestyles. So we have come to the end of our discussion, and what I picked up in this discussion, I tried to take down notes as I always do, but I'm sure I never take down enough. We started off by you mentioning there's no health without mental health. Social media can lead to depression and loneliness, but it also depends on our usage, what we actually let in. Grateful for technology during this pandemic, because I mean, let's face it, if we did not have this technology, we would not have been getting in contact with loved ones, like you mentioned, through social media, or even now we have Zoom platform where we can have conversations such as this. Identify anxiety when thoughts arise. and what boundary, whether it's a physical or a emotional boundary. And if it's an emotional boundary, you need to actually find out whether the mannerisms or mechanisms, what is important to you. And when you're dealing with your conflict, speak calmly, respectively, and yeah, I said calmly twice. Maybe I needed to hear that. Yeah, but thank you so much for that. I think it's also practice. Sometimes easier said than done. We need to practice this over and over again, like you also mentioned. Repetitive. I'm actually tongue twister here. Repetition in whatever we actually trying to practice, and the more we practice it, the better we get at it. So, to Rocky, I'm sure most of the people that are actually listening in, they already following you on social media. But if they are not following you on social media, where can they find you on social?
Yeah. So you can find me on Facebook. It's Rakhi Beekrum Psychologist. And you can find me on Instagram. It's also at Rakhi Beekrum.
Okay, I will also will share the links on my on the comment section for whoever that wants to connect with you. Um, are you also seeing anyone in, well, out of social? If anyone needs to actually have a one-on-one with you, are you able? I mean, are you able to open your practice to them?
Yes, absolutely. So what I want to say is, I mean, we get message like many messages every day. So we are not, health practitioners are not able to or not allowed, ethically allowed to give any advice on social media. So if you comment or if you send us an inbox message with your problem, we cannot respond to that. Ethically, we can't because we've not done a proper assessment and therefore we can do more harm than good. So, if you message us on those platforms, understand that ethically we're not in a position to help you. But I would always say if you're struggling, sometimes your GP is the first point of call if it's someone you have a relationship with, or you could see a psychologist that is close to and convenient for you to see. There's also, I mean, if you want, I do have a practice. It's in Durban North, and if you're elsewhere in the country, then we do offer sessions online on Zoom as well. I can also very highly recommend the South African Depression and Anxiety Support Group, and you can get help via a WhatsApp line or by calling in. So there is help available, whichever way is easiest and most convenient for you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any parting thoughts or any tools that actually helped you in your journey to share with us?
So I think being mindful is important, which means being in the present. Our anxiety is always about the future, it's never about right now. And those who tend to be depressed, it's because they focus on the past. They relive the past. They think about things that they can't even change anymore. So a lot of our power is right here and right now, because this is the only time we can actually do anything. We can't do anything in the past because it's gone, and the future we can only when we get there. To use social media mindfully. And a very good exercise that actually perhaps I'll leave you with is pick up your phone when you're scrolling and look at one post at a time. So the first 10 posts you're going to look at, you're going to pause, you're going to look at the post, read it, or look at the picture, and stop and check in with yourself and ask yourself, how am I feeling reading this or looking at this? And do that for 10 posts, because that will give you an idea of who to continue following and who to unfollow. And also something that we hadn't really touched on and I think is important, we spoke more about mental illness and social media, but comparing yourselves to others is something that happens a lot of the time. And therefore, I always say, do not lie in bed scrolling on your phone. Other than the fact that it impacts negatively on your ability to fall asleep or have a good night's sleep, the other thing it does, it subconsciously plays on your mind, because if the things that are not working out wonderfully in your life, you think everybody else's life is perfect compared to yours because everyone is just posting their wins and posting wonderful things, and then it impacts on our self-esteem because we think that everyone is doing better than us. So stop comparing yourself. And we are also able to be happy for other people even if we don't have what they have. So if someone is sharing something, be happy for them and celebrate for them, because it means that if it's possible for them, it's possible for you too. And someone else achieving something is not taking anything away from you. So I think it's important to be happy for others without comparing ourselves negatively to them.
Yeah.
Think about, I can be happy for you while still wanting to achieve things in my life. So to also recognize that what you see is never the full picture. It is just the highlight of that person's life. And as human beings, every single person is going through something. And they might not share it with you, they might not talk about it, but know for sure that part of the human experience is going through suffering. So always be kind, kinder than you think you need to be.
Very lovely thoughts that you're actually leaving us with. And I like to actually add to that as well with the happiness thing. When you're actually happy for another, you're actually attracting that to yourself as well. And like you said, all of us are suffering on this earth. It's the nature of this old material planet. Everyone is suffering, whether you're rich, poor, or whatever. Suffering is there. But thank you so much, Rakhi. We really enjoyed having you here, sharing all of your insights with us. And we do hope in the near future you do accept our invite again. I'm sure everyone will love that.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you again for creating this wonderful platform.
Okay, bye-bye. And bye to our viewers. We will see you again very soon. Okay, bye-bye.